wondering this week what it might have been like for those people to be there at that multiplication of the loaves and the fish. If they were attracted to Jesus, all that he was saying and doing, they heard about the kingdom, they saw people cured, maybe they were cured. As the time went on, they just sort of maybe got caught up in all this good stuff, and it's the end of the day, and they're probably tired and sweaty and hungry. They're like, oh man, we didn't expect to be out here all day. We got to get something to eat. And all of a sudden, this big, huge crowd is asked to sit down, and all of a sudden, all this bread and fish just keeps getting passed around. It's like, well, where did all this come from? Did they grasp like what was happening? You know, that amazing, miraculous multiplication. Now, like many years ago, I used to hear this little theory that maybe the real miracle was that he got people to share what they already brought. Is it a miracle that people share? You know, like such an amazing miracle that this is the one and only miracle that is in all four Gospels. It's that much of an impression. And as I heard once too from Father Benedict Groeschel, he said, if God can make the universe out of nothing, he could certainly make fish out of some fish. It's a miracle. But they really grasped what was going on, and I think maybe not, because in John chapter 6, after this multiplication of the loaves and fish, Jesus and his disciples go away, and they go following after him, and they're like, hey, where are you going? And he's like, you're looking for me not because you saw the sign, not because you recognized the miracle, but because you ate. You want more filet-o-fish sandwiches. But he says, don't work for the food that perishes, but for that food that is for eternal life. I don't know if they really grasp how amazing that whole, experience would have been. Until they read the Gospels later on, perhaps, like, I was there. I was thinking too then, like, what would it have been like to have been at the Last Supper, in the room where it happened, I guess, so to speak. Disciples are there. They would have, of course, walked with Jesus for 3 years and heard that bread of life discourse and the multiplication of the loaves and fish and all this stuff. But they really grasped when Jesus said, this is my body, this is my blood, with the bread and the wine. Maybe we can think, maybe not at that moment. Jesus did say on that same night, remember, like, the Spirit of truth will come and teach you all things and remind you of all things. So maybe at that moment they didn't grasp the amazing thing that was happening, right there. And then I was thinking, I wonder if we grasp like the amazing thing that happens right here today, or last Sunday or next Sunday. We can get caught up in the routine of it all, which is, routines aren't bad. Without routines, we have chaos. And routines enable us to enter in to something, whether we're like feeling it or not. But if you think about it, like, this is amazing. We just get caught up in the routine, and even for myself, like, I gotta be like making sure all this stuff like happens, and I have my part to play, and it's hard for me sometimes to enter in. But even the fact that we're here, in a sense, at Mass is so wild, because in 2,000 years of church history, a lot's happened in 2,000 years in the church, but we still have Mass. As St. Paul says in our second reading, I handed on to you what I received. This gift, that just keeps getting passed down. And no matter what other crazy stuff has gone on, that's like one of the things that we've been faithful to for 2,000 years. Following Jesus' command to do this in memory of me. It's amazing. And we can think like today, like around the world, all the different time zones and everything, like how many thousands of masses are happening today around the world? And that through that, Jesus multiplies his body and blood for millions of people. Actually a bigger miracle than multiplying loaves and fish for a few thousand. It's that great miracle of giving himself to us the Eucharist every time we come to Mass. Since there's a miracle going on. There's simple bread and wine, and it is simple. It's not like, it's all this great, stuff. Sometimes people will joke over the years about, the theme is that I'm hitting the wine cabinet, But I always say, no, it's the cheap stuff. It'll give you a headache. I don't do that. It's simple. But Jesus chooses the Alpha and the Omega, the Lord of the universe, chooses to come under simple forms to feed us with a very physically small portion of the Eucharist. Yet it's that which brings life to us. Just like we don't go without eating, we can't go without this spiritual food. Even though, right, when we receive communion most of the time, it doesn't seem like anything's happening. And I get that. But he's still there. He's still working on us. And God has planned this moment, in some sense, before the beginning of time. Of course, all time is equally before God, but as far as we know it, the Eucharist has been part of God's plan of salvation for a long time. We just heard way back in Genesis about Melchizedek offering bread and wine as an offering to Abram and blessing him. We hear about the manna, about the Paschal lamb, all things we hear in the Gospels. God has had this day in mind for a long time, that you and I are here at the Mass to encounter Christ in a particular way through the gift of his body and blood in the Eucharist. St. John Vianney said, if we knew what really happened at Mass, we would all die of joy. So it's probably good that doesn't happen. But can we have a deeper sense of the amazing miracle that this is right here? So as we encounter Christ here in the Mass today on this special feast of the body and blood of Christ, maybe we could pray for that grace to have our senses awaken perhaps just a little bit more to the great gift of Jesus present with us in the sacrament of his body and blood, our food for the journey as we go forth to live and to share his life.